Doctors have to look at so much information on a daily basis. One of the problems with this is that if a patient has a lot of conditions, they can have overlapping needs. They may even have medications that may counteract each other. When I have talked with doctors about how they manage this process or what kinds of information they're thinking about, they tell me about three general things that they're trying to work through. They're trying to look at what is the current state of the patient's condition. Is the treatment plan that they're on working or not? And if not, why? And what other factors may be contributing to the problem? Or what other information might they be missing? As I've been working on redesigning the electronic medical record, I have been thinking about how to make all of this information that a physician needs to look at and make it easier for them to scan and get through. One of the problems that I've been avoiding is a condition summary. Like, what is this information about the condition that a physician needs to know? Well, over the last couple months, I have been working on that exact problem. Been thinking about what is the workflow that a physician goes through, and then how do I support the information that they need in a way that is easy to scan, digestible, and actionable. Today I want to walk you through some of the design decisions that I've made about the condition module and how that plays in with the system that I've designed. The condition module that I've designed is right here on the screen, has three general sections. These sections are designed to help a physician understand and manage the workflow of a particular condition without them knowing that that's what's happening. There are three sections. There is the top section that is the summary, and I'm going to copy this and expand it so we can look at it in its completeness. There's the top section right up here that is the summary, trends, and recent events. There's the treatment plan, and there is the history. The summary and overview section is actually probably the most important section. This gives a user a description of what's going on, what the treatment plan is, and maybe what the most recent event was. It can give them a snapshot of trends of data about the particular condition and kind of the state of the condition, and then it gives them the recent events that are related to this condition. At the top, we have essentially a collection of sections or subsections. This is generally speaking the summary section. So underneath the summary, we have a paragraph. This is 2 to 3 sentences, as you can see in this design. Now, what is interesting about this design and what I think is useful is that underneath that, I've actually divided these into kind of sections within them of their own. The reason for this is I want this whole section to kind of be viewed together. I don't want it to look like it is 3 separate sections, but I want it to feel like these are all related pieces of information related to the summary. Now, trends is essentially just the latest readings. Now, for hypertension, this is a really easy to kind of create system. For hypertension, this is a little bit easier to visualize because you do have very exact blood pressure readings that need to be taken. And blood pressure is something that gets measured whenever you go see a doctor. So there's going to be point in time references available for this particular condition. And if a patient is using something like Apple Health and tracking their own blood pressure, then it's feasible that we could pull in that information into this system as well and display all of that trend. Now, one thing that I'm really loving about this detail is the use of color here. Now, I've used a turquoise teal kind of color here, and I've actually representing the different pieces of information with different shapes. So not only is the color different and kind of the value of the color different, but the shapes are different as well. This adds to the accessibility of this system so that if you can't easily distinguish between those colors, it's a little bit easier to tell. But it also helps to create a more cohesive system throughout. So we could easily expand this as we add different types of data visualizations into the system, all using maybe a teal color that would stand out but still be referenceable, useful, and accessible. Now, underneath that is a recent events kind of, I call this a well. This is basically a recessed section that holds more information. And the reason I used a well here is actually really interesting because I wanted this to be a section that contained these little item cards. Now, these item cards are essentially buttons throughout the system, and they're consistent everywhere. And they can take a variety of information. They can basically have a title, a subtitle, as we can see down below, a pill. They may even have a couple different pill variants inside of them. them. And the reason I wanted this is even though I've only got one event in here, it's feasible that there could be a couple different recent events inside of this section. And the goal with this is not necessarily to provide like, hey, these happened at this exact date, but for us to say, hey, these happened recently, and so they may be of interest to you. So the well actually helps create that separation, kind of recessing behind the information and elevating those items into their own list style. And because of this, this actually separates the list style from what is essentially the exact same list style below under treatment plan, but again, keeps it grouped with the summary and kind of that overview section. Now, down below, we have treatment plan and history, and these are essentially just these are the full width sections, and these are designed so that they are very separate from the summary. And the goal here is to kind of give a broader understanding of here are the things that are currently being done. Now, the treatment plan definitely could be a number of things. Now, these would all be things that are basically part of a plan section of a SOAP note that a doctor would create. So they might say, we're going to prescribe this medicine, we're going to order this test, we're going to do this counseling or this kind of recommendation maybe for lifestyle change, something like that. So all of those things would be part of the treatment plan for this condition. Now, the other thing is that when those get added into a note, they would actually get attached to the problem or the condition. So if you get diagnosed with hypertension, that hypertension diagnosis and condition gets added to your chart, and then those treatment plan options are attached to that. This is just another representation of how this information has to be kind of modular. A physician might want to look at lisinopril, for instance, as part of a medication list, but it's also a relevant piece of the treatment plan. But just because they're the same, just because they're different, slightly different contexts for the user, does not mean they should be represented all that differently. They're just in a kind of different context or different use for each of those. And the medication list is just essentially part of the list. In a treatment plan, it's a part of a wider context about what that user or what that patient is going through. So again, within this section, we have the same style of button kind of item style with the heading, maybe a subheading, and probably a pill of some sort. And the goal here is to help the user kind of grasp at a very brief glance what's going on, what are we doing, and is it working? And if it's not, again, probably indicated by the trends or maybe a recent event that they might look at, then they might look at these and go, okay, we probably need to adjust a medication. We might need to maybe try something else. And for one, this could mean that they're just going to change the dosage of the medication, which would be as easy as clicking on that medication, changing the dose, or they might need to actually spend some more time in the visit with the patient going over this, where there is at the bottom an add to visit button. And that helps them basically add that to potentially the visit as a reminder, like we need to go through this. Then down at the bottom is a history kind of timeline view. And the goal here again is to make this a condensed version of the overall patient timeline, but to make it a little bit more tailored to this particular condition. So this is like, this was diagnosed on this date, we prescribed this medication on this date, we added this, we tried this thing on this other date, we may have increased the dose of the medication, etc., etc. So anything related to the things related to this condition would get added here. And because this is at the bottom, this is kind of the very nitty-gritty version of this. And it's all the way at the bottom because it may not be necessary. It may not be something that they have to look at every single time. And more importantly, if there's a care team related to this, there could be multiple doctors, PAs, MAs, NPs, whoever it might be, there could be different members of the care team, the clinical team, that are making adjustments and changes to this condition or editing or adding things as this patient progresses. Now, this is really important more so for more complex management conditions, things like probably a cancer diagnosis would be the main one that I would think of, where there's an entire care team of oncologists and specialists that are working with a primary care physician through this plan. And so in that case, there would be other names, there would be other kind of events and notes and things like that that get added to this timeline so that the user has more information about what has happened with the patient. And again, this is actually done in a simple text format because I think the most important thing about the simple text format is that it's a little bit easier to read, and we're bolding in particular things. The user and essentially what happened. So, Dr. Brown refilled this prescription, or refilled refilled, lisinopril, 81 mg. So that would actually potentially then look like this. So lisinopril, and then something like that. And what this does is it makes it a little bit easier to scan across and say, okay, there's that, there's the reference to the medication. Okay, it looks like, it was refilled on this date. And the icons help add a little bit of visual recognition to those things. So there's not as much need to read every single detail. Again, increasing scannability, increasing the ability for the physician to get to the information they need and then take action. Remember, that's the goal here, is to help the physician take action into the next step. What is that next thing they're going to be doing? It's either going to be adjusting something, changing something, or adding something, really, or potentially even resolving altogether. This is an example of how working through the workflow with a physician and understanding the user's needs can improve the design and actually lead to some really interesting design decisions. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope you enjoyed looking at and kind of dissecting this design with me. If you have any thoughts about how this could be improved or what other information might be needed, I would love to hear about that. I do appreciate you watching, and I'll see you real soon.